You're listening to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, featuring guests who take the scientific talk about food and break it down for practical use. You've heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." Come find out what that really means. Experience conversations with experts in the field of nutrition and understand the power of food for our health, well-being, and beyond. Now, here's your host, registered dietitian and nutritionist, Mathea Ford.
Hi there, it's Mathea. Welcome back to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast featuring nutrition experts who are leading the way using food starts today, right now, with our next guest. It's great to have Dave Egerdahl on the show today. Dave, welcome to Nutrition Experts. I'm excited to have you on the show and share your expertise with my tribe.
No problem, Mathea. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Dave, we're going to talk today about a few different topics, but I'd like to start with letting you tell my listeners a little more about you and what you do.
So right now I wear a few different hats. I'm a patient services manager in a hospital in Colorado Springs. Basically what that entails is managing not only the room service aspect, but the nutrition aspect that goes along with dealing with all those different diets and menus and whatnot. I also do a lot of diet, nutrition, public relations stuff for the hospital. Like last week I was doing live television. Next week I'll be doing a heart healthy event where I'm doing a cooking demonstration on how to cook quinoa, things like that. And then since I just can't stay away from nutrition counseling and coaching, I do some coaching on the side as a kind of a side hustle, you could say.
Where'd you go to school?
University of North Dakota.
Okay, so you didn't stray too far from home.
Right.
So I think it's interesting to talk about dietitians working in patient services. I did that almost my entire career, and I love food service. So I would love you to talk a little bit about what it's like to manage a room service kitchen. And what is kind of room service like in a hospital? Because that's maybe a new concept for people, or maybe people have heard of it and they don't understand how it works.
Sure, it is. I think in the past, the expectation for hospital food has been, I get my Salisbury steak and dry mashed potatoes and some jello, and that's my meal. But yeah, it's changed a lot over the years where it's a room service style, the same sort of style you would see in a hotel, where patients are calling down, placing their order. And we have unique, sophisticated systems to track allergies, track diet needs, etc., and still allow them to get a pretty decent meal in the hospital while they're getting better. It's a whole complicated system with not just the order taking, but then, the production of it and the delivery of it. There's all kind of new technology to help track delivery times and all these sort of things. So it's pretty cool, unique, complicated, all rolled into one, but it's a fun challenge to have.
So if I'm a patient in your hospital, do I have to pay extra to get room service versus just a regular tray?
Absolutely not. No. And I'm sure the way it gets billed is different in every hospital, but I know for us, it's just part of the stay. So no, that's not extra. That's the price of admission. Is you get that perk.
So do patients have something in their room based on their diet, what they can eat, or how do they know what they can order?
In most places, in our place, I'll use my place as an example. So we have our regular menu, and then so that takes care of about 60% of the patients, because that's what we find are on a regular menu in our hospital. And then we have diabetics, which makes up the next bulk. And the way we communicate that to them is through the nursing staff, through the doctors. They're letting them know we're going to be putting you on this diet for such and such reason, whatever that may be. And sometimes it's new to them, which it's a challenge in itself. And then we have the carb counts in the menu. So that takes care of maybe another 20%. And then another about 15% maybe on a heart healthy. So we use ways to indicate whether a meal item or a menu item rather is heart healthy with a little emblem next to it. So that's heart healthy. And that takes care of about 95% of the diets. The rest of them get a little complicated. So we create special menus and distribute those when we need to. And then along with that, the diet operators are trained in diets by a dietitian, so they can help them along the way. And Health Touch, which is our system that we use to help with meal ordering, gives all that information of what sodium, fat, carbohydrate, whatever nutrient you want to be tracking for that patient. It's in there.
They have a menu in their room and they call down. It seems to me like that would be more expensive for food service. So is your hospital more of like a higher end hospital, or is it more expensive to have room service than regular like trays that people just get automatically?
Not necessarily. Once you have the infrastructure there, it's not much more expensive. I hope I'm not giving away any secrets, but the industry standard for a tray cost is about $1.80. And we are below that. So we're offering these menus. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we're a relatively large hospital. And so we can use kind of economies of scale to make food costs low, labor costs low, and then the cost of operating is overhead that gets eaten up just by the sheer volume that we do.
I guess what I'm thinking is somebody on a clear liquid diet, do they get to call down and order room service?
Yes. Yeah, we do that. We have a whole list of clear liquids that are, some of your typical clear liquids like broth and jello and, those sort of things. But then we offer Gatorade or certain things that are, not the typical clear liquid. And we try really hard to work with the docs and nurses on protocols where they don't have to be on clear liquids all that long, because the research is finding that, people are doing pretty fine if they are given a kind of a a la carte, allow them to order some regular meal items, as long as they're not too, hard on the stomach or whatever, unless it's like a GI surgery, then there's definitely some special considerations there.
I'm thinking of a regular tray and it's got all the food on it, whether you wanted it or not. It's got, a milk or coffee or a tea. It's got a dessert. It's got the entree. It's got vegetable sides. And when people call down, I'm guessing they're just ordering whatever they're in the mood for. So if all they want is a hamburger and some fries or whatever, they probably eat that more so than, do you find that they eat better and that they, eat a better portion of their trays, less food waste?
I don't know that we really track that necessarily. So the big thing that drives why a hospital would want a room service style dining is the personalization that it allows the patient. So most hospitals measure patient satisfaction through a third-party survey. And there's a financial incentive for hospitals to have a high patient satisfaction score. And also it's just good for the hospital to be rated high in that regard. So room service style dining drives that. When a hospital has room service style dining, their patient satisfaction scores improve immensely compared to like the old here's what's for lunch kind of thing, take it or leave it. Patients nowadays like to have a little bit more control of what's going on at their hospital stay, and food and service and nutrition is a big part of that.
Once you're in a hospital, there's very little that you have control over, and really being able to make some choices. You don't know when you're going to get your surgery, or you don't know when people are going to come into your room and talk to you, or how long you're going to be there. But having that choice would seem to be an excellent thing. So I guess I didn't get you to answer the other question. Is it pretty popular in hospitals, or is it still something that's growing?
It's becoming the standard. It's becoming something that most hospitals do. The reason why you wouldn't maybe do that sort of style of dining is because if you're a 20-bed hospital and there's just not enough folks to justify doing that sort of thing, it might not be for you. But if you're 150, 200, 300 and up bed hospital, it's not only very cost effective, it's very good on the satisfaction of the patient and the quality of their stay.
Something else you mentioned that you do at your hospital is like media relations, nutrition. So how does that work? How do you get those opportunities?
Relationships. So one of the things I love to do is speak in front of groups. I love to do that. I love to not just as a patient services manager, training staff or running a meeting, but I love to talk to groups about various nutrition topics. Like I do a monthly lunch and learn for the hospital. The last one we did was healthy fats, just pretty basic topic that the layperson doesn't have a lot of information about. And I just love getting in front of people, helping them in that way, providing any guidance or information I can give them, and do it in a way that they can receive and is meaningful to them is really important. Just having I don't do that necessarily because I'm going to get anything back. I just enjoy doing it, and I find that the more I do stuff like that, the more people will notice and say, "Oh, they might be good for this, or they might be good for that." So I get all these opportunities, and I'm not shy either. So I'll stand in front of a camera. I'll get on a radio station. I'll do a podcast. Not a lot of dietitians, I find, have that outgoing personality. At least like the ones I've worked with in the hospital. They're kind of they shy away from that. But I've always enjoyed it. In my past, I did a diabetic self-management, and the part of that was a monthly course that I would talk to groups of people. So I just sharpened my skills.
I get you, because I do love talking about nutrition. I do it all the time because I have this podcast, but I just love talking and hearing that interaction and being able to see what questions people have, being able to explain things maybe more clearly than the quick snippet that they saw on a TV show or on the morning news or whatever. So do you find you get asked a lot of kind of questions about what's in the news and stuff when you're on your presentations?
Some of the common stuff, what's popular now. So like vegan diets, I get asked a lot about that. I get asked a lot about keto. I get asked a lot. You name the fad, I get asked about it. So yeah, you gotta be prepared for that. And then if anything comes out of the news, people will ask my opinion of it. Or even if they're just doing something kind of, that I wasn't even aware of. Like one time I was walking through the halls of the hospital, and the media relations person said they were doing a thing on strokes, and they were saying, "So what's your opinion on that?" And I jokingly said, "I'm against them. If you can not have those would be good."
Yeah, if you could avoid them. Yeah.
The more you put yourself out there, I feel like the more that comes back to you. And it's not anything I'm necessarily advertising that I do or promoting that I do, but just being willing to do it creates those opportunities, I feel like.
Yeah, so that's a good tip for people that are listening that may want to do more of that, is just to start seeing where you can do some small things maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And definitely starting out, I mean, if some people they want to be compensated for their time. I think rarely does it start out that way. Usually it starts out you're kind of volunteering, or you're doing it out of a sheer enjoyment, and then it builds into that once you start building a fan base and a demand and all this stuff. So
from your perspective, one of the things that you like to talk about on your blog, and we've talked about, is how men and women's nutrition is different. So can you talk a little bit about that, about how maybe people could see that it's different? Because I think it's always interesting to get different points of view.
The field is still pretty well dominated by women, but it was just something I had a passion for. So it's what I decided I wanted to do. One of my first roles was a nutrition counselor. I would see diabetic patients, bariatric patients, renal patient here and there, and then little one-off in between. I want to lose weight, or I want to lower my cholesterol, stuff like that. So I started to notice that whenever I would get a guy consult, it would usually be a situation where his wife was coming along. And I feel like the guy always had kind of a standoffish, okay, it's going to be me and the missus against, or him and the missus against me. And I gotta go through this kind of thing. I started to notice that, and I was like, why is that happening? So I kind of did some research, and, typically guys, it's changing a little bit, but guys, when they're trying to get healthy, they don't really seek diet as a means to do that. Maybe they might do more exercise or something like that. But I started to relate to guys on a guy level, And, I started to learn more about, the differences in men's nutrition and women's nutrition. Basically, there's no difference. All the nutrients that are essential for men are essential for women. There's no difference there. But where the differences come into play is, a guy can get away with eating a little bit more food just because of, the differences in size, so their calorie needs are more. But also attitudes and preferences. Like men tend to be more meat eaters and that sort of thing. And you start to realize, well, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe there's, for instance, men produce much more testosterone than women. And there's a whole metabolism and nutrient need that goes around all of that. So, what are those nutrient needs and how can we provide those for men? And how can we let guys take control of their nutrition rather than kind of letting the missus handle it, that kind of thing. Once I started taking more of an approach where like, I'm helping you. If you're not interested in my help, I understand, but you need to take responsibility for your nutrition. I got a better response from guys because I think part of that is I'm a guy as well. But the other thing is like, I don't have to eat what she eats, and that's kind of the way it ends up going sometimes is that whoever's the cook in the family. And traditionally it's been the women. They kind of just put whatever in front of the guy. And he's like, oh, this is what's for dinner tonight, huh? Now that, I have to watch my blood sugar. So finding ways to meet guys' food preference in a way that, that's not, taking away their beer or whatever the thing is that they wanted to hold on to. And men just tend to have different goals, I think, than women in health. Just, working with people that I do, I found that guys tend to have more, they're more concerned with, how they perform, how they feel, rather than like getting a weight loss result or what have you. Where women, they're, if the doctor tells them their blood sugar's high, they want to correct that immediately on the spot. And that's a motivator for them, where it's not necessarily for guys. And I don't know if that's surprising to hear or not, but my blood sugar's high. So what? What does that matter? So I'm getting long-winded here, but yeah, that's kind of, some of the basic differences I've noticed.
Well, I think it's interesting because as a dietitian, working for a long time, I noticed a pattern too. I noticed that, and I'm always happy when the spouse comes along because that way there's not the friction of trying to change later. And obviously it's a generational thing a lot of times where the woman, wife, whatever, does most of the cooking. But interesting to think about men's weight loss goals differently, or men's nutrition, health, fitness goals, whatever, because when we talk to them, it's that switch that you're talking about, whereas finding out what they're interested in changing. And as you said that, I think about my husband because he's gained a little weight and he constantly talks about how he doesn't feel good and he wants to lose the weight. So it is related to how he wants to feel. It's not necessarily about the number on the scale. That's a good thought for people to have when they're talking to people. Just realize, the perspective difference. That's an excellent point.
Yeah. And I would say that's the main difference. Because when you really like boil it down and reduce it, it's we all need to eat healthy, but the layers beyond that are just like, well, what is motivating this person to want to do that? Because people say, well, I should do this or I should do that, but is that really what you want to do? When you really ask that question, like, well, no, I'd really rather do this, so it's finding, I guess, what that motivator is and relating to it and finding solutions for it.
That just reminds me a little bit that I recently had a little bit of an epiphany thinking about how we think about goals as far as trying to get away from something versus trying to go towards something. Because once you're getting away from something, then you kind of get a little more lax, versus if you're trying to go towards something, for example, an A1C number or something like that, you're more apt to reach it because you're going for that number instead of trying to avoid something. Can you talk a little bit about, dietitians do nutrition counseling typically. I see a lot of nutrition coaching. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think is the difference between those two and how you approach it?
From a practical standpoint, point for the nutritionist, there's really no difference. You're still doing an assessment. You're still coming up with some sort of nutrition diagnosis and then following up and monitoring. When I try to think of some of the differences, I know that when I was, in a counseling role, I was seeing more diabetic, more bariatric stuff that was covered by insurance. So they were referred to by a physician to me, that's that whole game. Coaching really is more like, I got a goal, and I really need somebody's help to get there. Whether that be, in terms of a nutritionist, whether that's just eating healthy or weight loss or gaining muscle or whatever it is, I guess that would be the main difference.
If someone is getting nutrition coaching, you see them a little bit more like not necessarily having goals of medical or lab related stuff, but more just personal weight or fitness or something like that. Is that what you'd say?
I think that's fair to say. I think especially in a hospital setting, for example, which I don't know, I kind of think of it as nutrition counseling, but some may not. That's a captive audience. They may not necessarily want to see you. But if you're putting yourself out there as a coach and you're saying, I'm offering this service for you, if you'd like, you're getting somebody who may be a little more motivated, maybe, has a goal in mind, where, that counselor or that person that's, the doctor's, forcing them to see a nutritionist or whatever, they might not have a goal. They may not, they may, not even be ready for change just yet, so you got to kind of, if you can, try to figure out how to get them there.
Yeah. So since you deal a lot with the healthy diet in the hospital and working with people doing different things, can you talk a little bit to the audience about how a healthy diet is different from a weight loss diet? Because I think a lot of times people think I've got to get on a diet to lose weight and then I can eat differently whenever I'm done losing weight, I guess. So can you talk a little bit about that?
The thing I've noticed is that people are using healthy diet and weight loss diet as synonyms, and which they can be at times, but you start to see some of the stuff that people are, doing to try to lose weight are not necessarily the healthiest things. Point to any fad and you can see, well, that might not be sustainable in the long term. You might end up having some trouble with that in the future. I remember one time going on TV, they asked me to talk about diet cleanses, these liquid cleanses. I think they fully expected me to say something different that I did say, because I pretty much put them down. I said, these are not a healthy, sustainable way to lose weight. And essentially, the weight you're losing during that week of cleanses is water weight. So if you're using that as a means of weight loss, I don't think that's the most effective or efficient means. And then you also look at the fitness industry and you see these very fit people like fitness competitors and bodybuilders and stuff like that. And they, it's assumed that, man, these people must be doing, they must have the healthiest lifestyle and the healthiest diet. And a lot of things they do are very healthy, but a lot of things they do are very extreme and very taxing on the body and not always the best for one's health.
Sometimes I think everybody should consider that they should be on a healthy diet, whether they're trying to lose weight or not.
Right. Any health behavior you do is going to, whether it's take a medication or follow a diet protocol or do an exercise program, it's going to have some side effect, whether good or bad. We can point to all the side effects medications have, but there's side effects associated with certain diets. If you start an exercise program that you're not acclimated towards, you're going to have some pretty serious side effects. You're going to be very sore. You're going to feel stressed. You're going to feel like you don't want to do this. And there's probably a reason for that. Your body's, not ready for it. So when I see things like, people wanting to do keto or people wanting to do fasting or, I encourage them to think, okay, I'm not against you trying that, but I want you to consider, is this something you're going to be able to sustain? And if not, what do you plan to do once you're done with it? Because, we all know about the yo-yo diet syndrome, and that's essentially not having a plan for once your diet fails. Basically, these protocols, you see a lot of research, and there's research really to back up anything as long as you have a strong enough belief about it. And there's research to disprove it, but it's just a matter of what are you doing? Why are you wanting to do that? And what's your plan B? Because if you've never done a low carb diet before and you try it for a week or two or a month and you decide this is not for me, what's your plan B? Because that's pretty typical, is that, people try something like that and go strong for a month and then it falls apart.
Being in Colorado, we all know Colorado has recreational and medical marijuana. I would just be interested what you see people using medical marijuana for that seems to be pretty effective with relations to any sort of nutrition stuff. You got any ideas about that? Typically,
what I see people using like edibles or smokable marijuana for is either like, for a while I was doing oncology inpatient nutrition, and that's something that's very popular with the folks who are going through that sort of treatment. It's just like another thing. It's just like curcumin. It's just like another thing where people have, they've latched onto this, the benefits of this one single thing, and they build products around it to try to, sell it basically. I got to be honest, I'm not too up to date on all the research of it because I think a healthy lifestyle doesn't necessarily need to include marijuana. Even though I live in Colorado, I'm probably going to alienate a lot of people in Colorado. But I don't think it's it's a cure-all. I'm sure there are some benefits to it because it's being used, but I don't know that it's something I can confidently tell people you should try this because I think it'll help you with X, Y, Z. Okay.
So one of the questions I always like to ask my guests is, what is your favorite food?
Pizza.
Pizza. Any specific pizza?
No, just pepperoni pizza is my favorite food. I know that's probably something you don't expect a dietitian to say, but we're human too. We like we like pizza and chocolate and occasional alcoholic beverage. So I will say that I've tried to make more of a traditional style pizza these days, where it's more of a thinner crust, more heavier on the fresh ingredients. Maybe like I've tried one recently with goat cheese rather than like a mozzarella because it's a little bit lower in fat than some of those cheeses out there. So it's my vice. I won't lie. I try to eat healthy 80 to 90% of the time, but if there's a pizza party going on, I'm going to partake for sure.
Well, it's got all the food groups, right?
No, I hate that too. I hate when people try to justify. just accept that it's not healthy, and that's okay. Okay, that's all right that it's not healthy.
All foods can fit.
Yes. But I don't like when well, chocolate's healthy, right? Because of if you got the dark chocolate, I'm like, yeah, dark chocolate's great, but have you had actual real dark chocolate? Do you really like it? Because I would venture to guess that if you've had 100% cacao, that you're not too into it.
Yeah, it's pretty bitter. Yeah,
but just be okay. That's another thing I like is people don't put too much pressure on themselves to feel like that they should eat away or they have to eat away, and if they don't, that it's some sort of they've committed some sort of sin. Just be okay with that. Just allow it. And part of taking care of yourself is, it's not only, getting the nutrients you want or need rather, but also allowing yourself to enjoy some of the things you do like. I mean, don't make it a lifestyle, obviously, but I mean, don't beat yourself up if you've, had some cheesecake, because it's fine. Don't let that, ruin you.
Gotcha. I love that because if you can add a little bit of mindfulness and portion, just getting enough to really satisfy that urge and then let it go. That's a great way to still get those things you want.
I like to use the term love. We should love ourselves. And, what kind of ways do we love ourselves? Well, what kind of ways do we love others? We cook for them. We, keep them warm. We give them gifts. You should be doing those things for yourself too. You should be putting the stuff in you that is good for you and allowing yourself some of those things that are, delicious, but not so good for you. And you should be, allowing yourself to have breaks and things like that. The things that we do to love others, we should be doing for ourselves too, so that we can love others better.
That's an excellent point. Dave, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. I know my listeners learned a lot about room service, kitchens, menus, all the different stuff we talked about today. So if listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on Facebook, Nutrition Gains with Dave Egerdahl. I'm on Twitter, David ERDN. And then I have a website, nutritiongains.com, where people can find me.
Okay. Well, guys, this has been another great episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast that is all about learning more so you can do more with nutrition in your life.
You've just listened to an episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast. Be sure to get more information about this week's episode at www.nutritionexpertspodcast.com. Tune in next time for another great conversation with a nutrition expert and expand your personal knowledge in the field of nutrition, one conversation at a time.